The morning the ceiling fan stopped. Our eyes felt it before he heard it. The sudden stillness in the air, the way silence pressed against his ears like a warning. His son was still asleep beside him, one small hand curled into the thin bedsheet, trusting the world would stay gentle. But our eyes already knew better. When the fan died, when the heat crept in through cracked walls, it meant the electricity bill hadn't been paid again. And that meant choices, impossible ones, were waiting for him before the sun fully rose. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. You never know who needs a reminder that hope still exists. By the time daylight spilled across the narrow street, Our Eyes was already dressed in his only iron shirt, smoothing it with his palms as it could hide the exhaustion etched into his bones. His son, Zion, woke with a sleepy smile, asking the same question he asked every morning. If today would be a good day. Our Eyes always nodded, even when he wasn't sure what that meant anymore. Life had narrowed into a routine of survival since Zion's mother passed away 3 years earlier. Our Eyes worked as a junior accounts assistant in a towering corporate building that felt like another world entirely. Polished floors, glass walls, people who spoke in confident tones and never seemed to count coins before buying lunch. He never let anyone there see the cracks in his life. To them, he was quiet, reliable, invisible, until the day everything shifted. It started with a mistake that wasn't his. A misfiled report, a missing number, a ripple that turned into a wave by the time it reached the top floors. Our Eyes was summoned, not to his immediate supervisor, but to the CEO herself. People whispered as he walked past, their eyes following him like he was already condemned. The CEO, Sonia Voss, was known in the company like a storm you could never predict. Brilliant, distant, feared. She carried herself with a kind of quiet authority that made rooms fall silent when she entered. Our Eyes had only seen her from afar before, a figure behind glass doors and guarded meetings. But now he stood in her office, hands trembling slightly, explaining himself in a voice that felt too small for the space. What happened next didn't make sense to anyone. Instead of firing him, Sonia listened, not just to his words, but to the pauses between them, the weight behind them. She asked questions no one had ever asked him before, not just about the report, but about his workload, his responsibilities, the late hours he had been putting in. Something shifted in her expression, subtle but real. The company was hosting an urgent out-of-town conference that same day. She said he would accompany her to assist with financial documentation. It wasn't suggestion. It was an order. Our Eyes barely had time to process it. By afternoon, he had arranged for a neighbor to watch Zion, packed a small bag, and found himself in a car heading toward a city that felt even further away from his reality. The hotel they checked into was nothing like anything he had ever seen up close. High ceilings, marble floors, sunlight pouring through tall windows that made everything feel almost unreal. But a booking error had thrown everything into chaos. Every room was occupied, except one. A single room, one bed. The manager apologized profusely, offering solutions that never quite materialized. The conference schedule was tight, the city overbooked, and time was slipping. Sonia made the decision quickly, almost too quickly. They would share the room. Our Eyes felt the ground tilt beneath him. It wasn't just the awkwardness. It was the difference between their worlds, suddenly compressed into a single space. Daylight stretched long into the evening as they worked side by side, reviewing documents, correcting numbers, preparing for the next day. There was no small talk, no unnecessary words, just a quiet rhythm of two people focused on a task. But something began to shift. Sonia wasn't what he expected. There were moments, brief, almost hidden, when her guarded demeanor slipped, when she paused longer than necessary, staring at something only she could see, when her voice softened, just for a second, before returning to its usual controlled tone. Night came, and with it, an uneasy stillness. Our Eyes insisted on taking the floor. It felt like the only way to maintain a boundary, to preserve some sense of normalcy in a situation that had none. Sonia didn't argue. She simply nodded and turned off the light. But sleep didn't come easily. Sometime past midnight, when the city outside had quieted and the room was wrapped in a dim, restless silence, Our eyes heard it. Not a sound, exactly. More like a fracture in the quiet. A voice, low and unguarded, speaking into the darkness. Sonia thought he was asleep. She spoke not in commands or sharp, efficient sentences, but in something softer, something fragile. Words that carried a weight he hadn't expected. She spoke of a past no one in the company knew about, a childhood marked by loss, by responsibility forced too early, by choices that shaped her into someone the world respected but never truly understood. She spoke of a sibling she had failed to protect, a moment she replayed in her mind over and over, as if time could somehow be rewritten through regret. Our eyes lay still, every instinct telling him to pretend he hadn't heard. But something in her voice, something raw and human, held him there. In that moment, the distance between them disappeared. Morning came with sunlight spilling across the room, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Sonia was composed again, every trace of vulnerability carefully tucked away. Yet when their eyes met, there was a flicker of something unspoken, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that the night had not gone unnoticed. The conference went flawlessly. Numbers aligned, presentations impressed, decisions were made. To everyone else, it was just another successful corporate event. But for our eyes, it felt like standing at the edge of something new. When they returned to the city, life didn't snap back into place the way he expected. Instead, small changes began to ripple outward. Sonia started involving him more directly in projects, not as a favor, but as recognition. She asked for his input, trusted his judgment, gave him opportunities that once felt out of reach. The whispers in the office shifted, from doubt to curiosity, from curiosity to respect. At home, Our Eyes found himself breathing a little easier. Bills were still there, challenges still real, but something had changed inside him. A quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered to the office windows, Sonia called him in again. But this time, there was no tension, no fear of what might come next. She spoke of growth, of the company, of the people within it. And then she spoke of him, not just his work, but his resilience, his integrity, the way he carried responsibility without letting it harden him. She offered him a promotion. Our Eyes felt the weight of the moment settle around him. It wasn't just a title or a salary increase. It was a shift in the story he had been telling himself about who he was and what he deserved. That evening, he returned home earlier than usual. Zion ran to him, laughter filling the small room that once felt too quiet. Our Eyes lifted him up, holding him a little tighter, as if anchoring himself in the life that mattered most. The ceiling fan spun steadily above them, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt light. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Special requests. Comment second chances matter. If you believe that even the hardest lives can turn toward hope, because sometimes the biggest changes don't come from grand gestures or dramatic moments. They come quietly, in the spaces between who we were and who we're becoming. In a shared room, a midnight confession, a decision to see someone not as they appear, but as they truly are. And in those moments, lives don't just change. They begin again.